Thank you for starting the recording. Yeah, thanks very much for joining today. We've got three topics, which are not quite in the order advertised. Laurent is going to give us a quick introduction to things taking place in the upcoming European Bioconductor meeting, which is happening in a couple of weeks. So he's just going to give us a little heads up about some developer day things there. Then we're going to get an update from Laurie and Hervé about some of the kind of pitfalls that have happened in the most recent release cycle and things that maybe we need to be aware of moving forwards. And then our final topic, Steffen is going to talk about semantic findability for Bioconductor packages. So how do we label them? How do people know how to find them? That kind of thing. Hopefully that's going to be a really interesting topic, kind of expanding on the BioC task views kind of thing. So Laurent, if you're on, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just wanted to give a very brief update about the European Bioconductor Conference that will happen on the 9th and 10th of December in Brussels. So I posted in the chat window the URL to the conference webpage. So all the details are there. Very briefly, we have 10 invited speakers. And we already have their names and their titles available on the web page. We'll also have, I don't remember how many, quite a few, I think, flashlight sessions. Again, these have already been selected, so there is no room for additional flashlight talks. But if anyone is still interested, registrations or submissions for posters are still open, and we'll have, I think, currently something like between 15 and 20 posters that have already been submitted. During the conference, we'll also have discussion groups. And so these will be based on some of the invited speakers. Some of the topics that they will present. So, for example, Martin will be there to give kind of his yearly overview of the Bioconductor project. And so he'll be animating a topic that is the Bioconductor project, getting started and moving from user to developer. And so people that are interested on that topic, getting to know the project a little bit better, will be able to go in a separate room with Martin and kind of ask their questions and animate discussions on that topic. We'll have a second topic that will be moderated by Davide Risso about single cell assays, including RNA-seq, but not necessarily limited to RNA-seq. We'll also have a session about containers and cloud computing with Christine Chouara and Vince Carey will also be moderating that session. And finally, we'll have the group discussion about multi-omics data integration that will be moderated by Levi Waldron. So that's part of the conference that happens on Monday and Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, there's an optional developer or kind of more power user-oriented developer day. And that's kind of optional and free for people to register. And we'll have kind of time slots and rooms prepared for people that would like to work on a very specific topic. And I also posted a link to the issue page where people can suggest topics they would like to work on. And currently we have two topics. We have one that will focus on mass spectrometry-based proteomics and metabolomics. And I will be chairing this one, and I know that Johannes Reiner will also participate, and Sebastian Gibb, the people that are involved in mass spec and metabolomics, proteomics, and Bioconductor. And there is also already a second group that has been suggested that will be chaired by Charlotte and Federico about expanding the collection of IC modes. And I think if Charlotte is present, she might want to say a little bit more about that specific group. And so these kind of this developer day will happen on Wednesday right after the conference. And if people are still interested to register, we already have, I think, 70 people that will attend, but there's still room if people are still interested to register, and there is a link on the conference page with all the details. that's it for me.
So how many sort of breakout sessions on the third day are you hoping for?
I can imagine that 3 or 4 or so, the third day, right, for the developer day. I was thinking of, 3 to 4. But if there is more interest, I don't think it would be too difficult to get more rooms, or more groups. That means less people per group, so maybe people could even share a room. But I guess 2, 3, 4 is probably a sensible number. But these will be purely kind of user-driven, so people will self-organize the way they want, and we'll provide coffee to get them coding on.
So yeah, I guess if there's any topics that have come up in these meetings or discussions on the Slack or anything like that where people want to actually, instead of just talking about it, sit down and hack something out, this sounds like the perfect kind of forum for people to have a longer, more than 20-minute discussion about these sorts of things, maybe prototype something, and then we can talk about it again in this kind of session, I guess, after the meeting.
Yeah. And if new groups want to be formed during the conference, there is no problem with that, of course.
But yeah, if anybody else has got an idea, go to the GitHub page that Laurent's linked to and submit an issue or something. I guess there doesn't need to be a huge amount of content, but let people know you're thinking about it. Does Charlotte want to advertise the IC module at all?
Yes, I can. So basically the idea is that you can kind of have these modes in IC where you predefine the panels and the content of the panels that you basically start up the app with, and we have a couple already, but we thought it would be useful to have a bit more. And it's also, we really want to have like other people's input on what types of mode could be useful, what type of data they're analyzing, and what type of panels those types of data would be helped by, let's say. So that's the idea, to come up with some suggestions and implement it basically during that session.
Awesome, thank you. In which case, Laurie and Hervé, would you like to give your kind of summary of how the last release cycle went? I think it's potentially very interesting and hopefully very useful going forwards.
Sure. I put together a few slides of the common pitfalls that we're seeing. I mean, for the most part, from our perspective, the release went well. I think it was one of the earliest releases that we've gotten out, as Hervé pointed out. Can you see my slides? Is it showing up? Yeah. Okay. But we have noticed that there are build failures, especially across all 3 platforms. And part of that had to do with some of the changes with R 4.0. And so we just kind of wanted to touch on what we were seeing. The main one that is breaking probably 80 to 90% of the packages that are failing across all 3 platforms is the S3 method registration, where they're currently failing because they're undeclared S3 methods, where before you could have these S3 methods and they didn't necessarily have to be strictly declared, and now they do in the namespace. And it is a really simple fix. It's just in the namespace adding your S3 method with your function in your dispatch class. And looking through, we tried to debug a lot of packages to make sure that it was the issue. So it would be, these are some of the examples that we saw, like from the TCC package, they had a plot method or their TCC object that wasn't properly defined. And yeah, the interesting thing is that the errors that we see on the build system take a lot of different forms depending on what method was not declared. So these were some, and the majority that we were seeing were these kind of chorus class to a data frame, cannot chorus S4 to a double, no applicable method found, be applied to an object, and X is listed but not have components X and Y. So if you're seeing these types of errors, chances are it has to do with the S3 method registration. One of the other changes in R 4.0 was the conditional lengths greater than 1. It is currently a warning message. And traditionally, if and while statements, you could act on vectors and it would essentially ignore the vector and use the first element to decide if it was true or false, which has been tightened up a little bit. So right now in R as default, it's a warning, and actually on the Bioconductor build systems, I believe we treat this as an error because there was talk about eventually maybe making it an error instead of a warning. So just something for people to be aware of, because really it is poor practice and poor coding to rely on a first element rather than a vector. So. Another one that isn't really a change in R or Bioconductor as of yet, but there's been a lot of discussion about it, is using the class equals versus the is or inherits function. And I'm not going into much detail. I'll share the link to these slides in Slack after the meeting's over so you can reference it. But this R developer forum discussion has a lot better discussion than I could give an explanation. So I encourage you to go there. But the long short of it is using class equals should be avoided. It can be misleading, especially if classes extend other classes where you really want a more strict test. So is or inherits is a much safer and cleaner option. And we have encouraged that as part of our Bioconductor best coding practices that we have.
We lost your screen sharing.
Oh, oops.
It's because you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. So another issue is the partial argument matching, where there's now more strict check on argument matching. And I think this only broke maybe 1 or 2 packages, but it basically has to do with the set generic having like a break, and then the set method has like breaks where you'll notice the S is 1. And before it would kind of do a partial match, or it would figure out the best options, and now it is more stringent. And this also, I believe, has to do when you're calling a partial matching with functions as well, and function arguments. And really, as a best coding practice, you shouldn't take shortcuts and rely on argument matching. So we would really encourage using the full argument names. Obviously, one of the errors that we always see has to do with package dependency issues. This release cycle, these 6 months now where we're using RDevelop especially, part of that is beyond our control. And I think I mentioned it on the mailing list and the support site. We're kind of at the mercy of when CRAN binaries are available for Windows and Mac. And as soon as they become available, the daily builder will automatically load them, and they will be available. But until they are, we're not going to try to do any sort of workaround, and when they're available, they're available. We have a couple packages that are now breaking because of packages being removed from CRAN. And if this is the case, we'll be reaching out because we really do only support dependencies that are being actively maintained on CRAN or Bioconductor. So you can either reach out to the maintainer and ask them to reinstate their package, or alter your code to not use it. And then along with that, we're getting more aware of packages that remain broken and having the deprecation cycle for Bioconductor packages as well. Some of the ones that were deprecated and maintainer requested deprecated last cycle were SNP, CHIP, and genome graphs. And those are causing probably 5 or 6 package errors that packages will have to decide if they want to re-alter their code or take over maintainership or something along those lines. The there are a few errors related to deprecated functions, and most of the errors have a message indicating what function should be used instead. The 3 that we're seeing on the build report currently are range data, where Hervé has tried to reach out individually to packages, but range data has been defunct now for quite a few release cycles and should be moved to granges or granges list. And then there's also a couple having to do with normalize and calculate QC metrics, which also the maintainers are very nice and tell you which function they should use instead. So we'll be reaching out to those. Some useful links. So in the previous slides, I referenced the R developer blog, and we really weren't sure how many people were really aware of it, but it is a useful tool. If my internet would work and actually display it. I'll try one of these. So like this is where I said they do a much better explanation of the class equals versus is an inheritance here, rather than me trying to explain it. But there is an public blog for our devel which does list changes and doesn't want to display here, but I will make sure that there is a working link when I share later. That makes you aware of some of the changes and has some good discussion about potential changes in R and R devel. And just semi-worth sharing, I'm going to remove this link because we're going to make a more formalized place where we're going to post it. But Hervé and I did spend a lot of time going through the errors that we saw and what packages were failing and what needed to be done. So these will be posted, and we will be reaching out to all of the packages that had those S3 registration errors, as well as any other sort of errors, and point them to a troubleshooting doc that we will post in a more public place, help them be able to fix their package in a timely manner. That's all I had. I don't know if Hervé wanted to add anything else from the build system.
Two comments from my side. One of them is a suggestion I had for a while, that it would be very cool to archive the build reports. So you probably on a daily, mostly daily basis, you push the build reports to the website. And one idea could be to archive the entire set of build reports from the last day into a subdirectory that has a particular date, because that allows to go back in time and see intermittent issues or see when some issue has arisen. That might be some very cheap improvement.
I know it's come up in the past. Hervé, did you have any follow-up comments for that?
Yeah, I think I remember this came up in the past, and when Dan was taking care of the builds, I think he started to implement something with maybe an SQL database and things like that, but it was never put in production. So yeah, I don't know. We could do that. I would, if I'm gonna do it, I will probably do something much simpler, where we just keep the HTML versions of the reports that we produce every day, as you said, Steffen, somewhere in a folder that would be publicly available, something simple like that. Yeah, that's something we can do, certainly.
And a second comment I have is that, at least in our case of XCMS, we see that on Windows we are hitting fairly often timeouts, which are likely also because it's checking things twice. for the two architectures. So a question would be whether one could, on the Windows builds, do something crazy where you have the scheme as it is right now, building both architectures, but maybe the checking done separately on different build machines if one wanted to complicate the setup like that. I'm not sure.
So that will certainly complicate the setup a lot. To split the check part between two machines and have one take care of the 32-bit architecture and the other one taking care of the 64-bit architecture. I mean, the RCMD check command is, yeah, go ahead.
Basically, I'm saying skip tests or skip vignettes on the current setup and would be adding two more build machines for Windows, one doing the entire E386 and the other one doing the other path.
I understand, but I think there are much simpler solutions. We could, we could give extra time to MZR if that's, it's going to be much. I mean, I don't want to encourage, I don't want to advertise this too much, but we could make some special treatment. We could have something, implemented in the .bbs options file that maybe you have one already in NZR, I don't know. But something that marks the package as one package that needs special treatment, extra time, basically, for RCMD check. Is that RCMD check? I remember that NZR can also sometimes take a very long time to install. So RCMD install maybe would need some extra time too. But
it's actually
about
XCMS. It's actually about XCMS, which is improving test coverage right now.
XCMS. Okay. So if it's about the test coverage, glad you mentioned that it's about unit testing. So good, it's excellent that you guys have improved the test coverage, and I don't know if you're aware, but we have the long test builds that are exactly for that, and some packages already subscribe to the long test builds. I think Aaron has a couple of packages that are already subscribing to those builds. So those builds are run once a week, and they give you 6 hours to complete all your unit tests. And I can, after the meeting, I can send a summary of how this works, where those builds are, how you subscribe to them. I posted something on BioC level a couple of years ago about that, but I can send a reminder. And so it's easy for you to subscribe to those builds and to have your test split into the regular testing, the low coverage testing, let's say, and a more extensive testing, and have this more extensive testing being run once a week.
Very good. Yeah.
I don't know if that will help. Okay.
So are those options documented somewhere at the moment? Both the .bbs options. I know I've seen them and read about them somewhere, but it's like somewhere on the mailing list maybe, or somewhere in Slack, but I have no idea. Are they actually on the website somewhere?
No. No.
I don't think so, because we don't like to advertise them to make sure they don't get abused.
It's right. The way it's used. The way it's used right now is mostly to skip building and checking on some platforms, right? If you don't want, and we don't want to encourage this either, but there are situations where this is justified, right? If you can't or don't want to support your package on Windows or Mac for whatever reason, you can say that in the .bbs options file. And I guess we should document at least that part. There are other things that you can put in that .bbs options file that maybe we don't want to advertise too much, but that part, it's probably a fair request to have it documented somewhere. It's very easy. It's just a one-liner to add to the .bbs options file.
And probably advertising the long tests option, like that one
Yes.
maybe isn't so debatable, right? Like that's a really useful thing that some people won't want to
Yes.
use, but clearly a few use cases where actually that's really quite helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hervé, maybe I can touch base with you and we can get it on the website under like the package guidelines where we have the info about tests and either create another document that links to it or another section there.
Yeah.
I have a couple of things to say. One is that I highly recommend that blog post that Martin Mackler wrote. I think it's excellent. Starts off a little bit odd, and then the content is really great. So I totally echo what you guys have said about people should read that. It's really helpful. There's been some talk about the new Windows toolchain and GCC 8 and this kind of thing. Do we have any idea how that's going to affect us? Are we going to try and start using it as well in the future, or?
So we're being very conservative on the build machines. I don't want to mess up the settings and the entire setup on the. It's too easy to mess up things especially on Windows. So I'm just waiting right now. I've heard about the new upcoming version of our tools and the new compilers, the new versions of the compilers that are going to be bundled in our tools. I'm just waiting, and generally our strategy is to just follow the CRAN lead, right? So as soon as the CRAN people start to use this to produce to build Windows binaries on CRAN, we'll do the same thing, right? We just want to use what they use. And it's been the same thing for the Mac OS version. We're stuck with El Capitan right now because that's what they use on CRAN. And we're stuck with whatever version of G-Fortran they use on Mac because that's what they use, and we have to use the same thing. And I don't know. I don't know what the consequences are going to be when we switch to this new version of our tools. I expect some surprises. Yes. And we'll add as we go.
Right on CRAN, they've started building packages with both tool chains on CRAN as of they now release binaries for some packages built with both tool chains. So that might not be much fun for you guys, but I just thought I'd give you a heads up.
Okay, well, thanks. I mean, the more, and we've seen this in the past when we for this devel cycle that happens in the winter in preparation for the spring release, we are using RDevel, right? And in the past, it has always been a more difficult situation than the devel cycle that happens, the rest of the year, the other half of the year, because the other half of the year we use a version of R that is stable. But for this one, it looks like a lot of changes are coming, and so be ready to see a lot of failure on the bit. We'll try to keep up by adding things to this document that Laurie mentioned that we're going to put on the website, where we summarize all the things that are going wrong and that need to be fixed in people's packages.
And again, that's not up yet because we just kind of started going through the build report and finding all these errors this week, but we plan to post it on the website either tomorrow or early next week with like a summary of like troubleshooting, common error type thing.
And that sounds like a really helpful resource. I think there was a question, I guess on the Slack channel, which was sort of focused on when does the Bioconductor core team step in if something breaks and it's in like an important package that has a lot of users, but it's gone unreported? Like, where do you make the decision between retiring a package and somebody else needs to take it over? Like, is there a policy for that?
No, not officially, I don't think. I think we look to see the consequences. If it's not a Bioconductor maintained package, are the maintainers active? Are they not active? Can we get a hold of them, any one of the listed authors or maintainers, and then kind of move from there? Have you seen one that requires such?
Top Go was being reported as, I haven't looked recently, but this was what founded the discussion, was that that's got a relatively large number of dependencies, or I guess reverse dependencies, but some small changes have been made by the BioC core team in the last 2 years or something like that, and now it was failing again. And I guess you're expanding the list of things that are going to be retired or deprecated or whatever the right terminology is. So yeah, I just wondered whether where you draw the line, because I guess the two packages that the two most used packages that I maintain, I didn't start writing, right? Both BioMart and RHDF5 are other people's projects, and I guess Wolfgang's name is associated with them, and so he was contacted, and then he handed it to me. And hopefully people think that's a success.
Try to do, yes. I mean, for, I guess, a little background. So I've started kind of maintaining the build report and reaching out to packages that fail across all 3 platforms. With the given release, I normally wait 2 or 3 weeks to see if a package maintainer will fix it on their own. Obviously, there's a lot of intermittent failures and things that happen that clean up on their own. If a package remains broken and I have a script that I run that kind of keeps track of it, I'll reach out. For the record, TopGo was actually responsive. I did ping them last week and they are working on it. And then I'll shoot them an email like once every week or every other week for 2 or 3 weeks, and if it remains dead, then it will be deprecated. And then depending on the use case and how many backwards dependencies and where we are in the release cycle, we'll start reaching out to either other authors and maintainers and either decide to deprecate it or put it out for the community that it's an orphaned package and would someone like to take over maintainership, and see what kind of response we get from the community of, no, we really need this package, or no, we don't. And
I think this orphaning could be done more often or earlier for people to step in if needed. So that would help getting help in earlier. I know that I sometimes cry for help on the developer mailing list, and that helps getting feedback, or even somebody saying, oh, we really feel sorry for you and we know how that is. So some moral support as well.
Great. In which case, Steffen, would you like to introduce your topic about semantic findability or something like that? You should introduce the topic yourself, since I can't even spell it on the Slack channel.
Okay, so you probably see my not slides, just a text document. And the point is that back in 2016, we started writing a review where initially I wanted to review a handful of metabolomics-related packages and how they work together. This turned into a monster review with more than 200 metabolomics-related packages and 300 citations and a whopping 50 pages of review in the end. And what we have done there was really more or less classic literature research. And it was not always fun. And some of the comments we make in the paper is also about how the landscape looks like and how you navigate the landscape. So, for example, I wrote a bit about the task views and which of those would be for metabolomics. Of course, we have the BioC views. Then we were finding a few packages on this RDRR.io website. And finally, in the last couple of months, I found this GitHub feature where you can actually annotate your package with tags. And the main point about how this is organized is that you can query out there for stuff that is related and you're interested in. And I was mentioning this exercise, this fun exercise where we were doing a dependency network of packages in metabolomics related stuff that depend on each other. And we were pulling off stuff from the web and making this graph. And by doing actually that, we also found a few packages that we didn't know about before. So main point is what would be even cooler is if the findability of that is improved. I mean, we've been talking about fair data all the time, but software also wants to be fair. And one of the things that we've come across is BioSchemas, where this derives from the schema.org thing. And schema.org is also powering some of these boxes that you sometimes see on Google, where you Google for a recipe and it'll give you something, or you Google for a city and it might give you the population and stuff like that. And the BioSchemas people, they have set out to use the same mechanism and build what they call profiles for the life sciences so that it's easier to find stuff. And what would be relevant for the Bioconductor environment is software applications, which are like tools. And they could be annotated with ontology terms, and they could be coming from the EDAM ontology on bioinformatics stuff. And you can either browse the EDAM ontology on BioPortal, if you like that, or the EBI has the ontology lookup service that you can also use for browsing these. And it's a rich ontology that has different branches, so it's not only a tag kind of thing. And the ways we could get more of that into Bioconductor is if we start putting stuff from the description that is always available for the BioC packages into the BioC websites. And this is now work that has been done and pioneered by Egon, who couldn't make it tonight. So he has, he has found the GitHub template page that is creating the package detail view. And he has a pull request on embedding some of this schema.org stuff into the website, which eventually will then look like what you see here on the left, which is which looks like a JavaScript thingy, but it's actually JSON linked data thing, which gives you tag value of the name, description, and so on. And if you then go, and the link is coming from the pull request, or the screenshot is coming from the pull request, if I recall correctly. And if you now go to the Google schema.org visualization thingy, you will see that it can pick up the terms and eventually would be able to show that also on the Google search pages. Now, this is embedding bioschema stuff from the description into the Bioconductor web pages. And another thing that Egon has done is to put bioschema markup in vignettes, which are done in Markdown. And you can, again, embed some information into that. He wrote a blog post on that for his BridgeDB package, and the wiki pathways is also improved to make use of that. And by having that, you can have other third-party tools crawl your websites. And for example, if I show then what TESS is doing. TESS is the Elixir Training and Education Material System something, and it will now find and list training material. And of course, most of our vignettes are training materials, and you can have a meta search for these materials on TESS. Okay, so questions about bioschema stuff so far?
It looked like there was already 180 bioconductor things in the test screenshot you just showed there. What are they? Are they already tagged? Or
to be honest, I was asking myself the same thing. I might have an idea that this might be coming in via bio.tools, but I'm not entirely sure there. But we can certainly get in touch. Yeah.
Those are lists of tools rather than training materials, or I'm not particularly familiar with the, like I've heard of Elixir, but I don't have any idea what this website is.
So basically, this is a web crawler crawling for training material in the first place. And since it's Elixir, I would hazard a guess that it's also interacting with the bio.tools registry. But then I wouldn't entirely know. Or it could be a training course on a particular tool. That would be possible. I couldn't really tell.
So then the pull request that's on the Bioconductor, I guess the Bioconductor website, GitHub, that's essentially injecting some more tags around the code that's already there.
Yeah, it should be really painless to merge that. One might want to have a test drive or watching out if that breaks something. That's something we certainly can't do from here.
One of the reasons why we hadn't merged it yet was because there was discussion about adding additional tags, and we were never, the last comment that we had in the thread that it was going to be expanded and worked on, and then we never got pinged back that there was. So I can certainly be in contact about this as well, but we were under the impression that it was still being worked on and expanded on.
The point about worked on is not changing the model as such, what is going to happen, but expand of putting more fields in. But it would be great if this could be already be merged so we get the low-hanging fruits in, and then we can ponder what other information we could make available via that theme, but we would have a foot in the door.
Okay, we can continue this discussion on the issue then, but that's the reason why it hasn't been pulled in, because we were waiting on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the second part I would like to come to is the Elixir BioTools registry, which is a registry of software and other resources, going from simple command line tools to complex stuff. And this, again, has a very nice syntax and semantics to describe tools and stuff, which is much richer than what we have in the description of an R package. And we don't have to do it in all the fancy ways. What I'm pulling up is a Java tool done here in Germany by somebody. And this is even listing the data input types and then what types of processing it can do and what the output would be. And we have very nice tags of things, versioning and all of that is available from there. And this is where I had one of the queries to query for our related metabolomics packages that would be coming from there. It has a very nice API to ask for stuff. And I think it would be great if we get some way of having them pull in Bioconductor packages. There is an issue that I raised on their registry, on their issue tracker, how they do that. And during that discussion, it came up that the links in bio.tools to Bioconductor packages are oftentimes broken if a package has moved on and then has a new version, then the link to the old version wouldn't work anymore. And there we need to figure out if that can be rescued by more often pulling, so we have mostly up-to-date links in there, or what they have been asking for. This was also from a comment from the Bioconductor people, which also package our and Bioconductor packages in Bioconductor. And they said that one of the issues is that Bioconductor is not archiving old binaries or tarballs. It's not binaries, it's the source tarballs they would want to see referenced, so they have reproducible builds even on old versions.
I believe we do have a source archive now. It was recently implemented, but we should have archived source tarballs. And as far as download links, are you referring to like a specific tarball link or the landing page itself, or?
We have that discussion in this BioTools thingy, and I'm not entirely sure when some of these break, but it's documented in here. So that would be something, if you could revive discussions in that issue, that would help them on the way out, and then we might even get more of the Bioconductor stuff. So basically, my suggestion here for the BioTools is that we don't have, we Bioconductor don't have to do an awful lot. There might be some interactions following this issue where somebody was answering that they have a script to load information from Bioconductor, BioC views and stuff, which needs to be updated and mapped to the EDAM ontology terms. And then they could, on a more regular basis, pull in Bioconductor descriptions.
I'll just say that with our archives, I think we follow what CRAN does. So in some ways, the problem is bigger than us. There's a separate path to the archives. It's like, I don't know, instead of, but the tarballs are there, at least in the release branch. Each of the versions are there.
Which probably means on the BioTools, they need to have different links than what they have at the moment. I think at the moment they are scraping them from the package detail page, so to speak. Okay, so to wrap up, one thing I found is that the Bioconductor website currently does not have a sitemap. Sitemap is an XML file that gives you an index of all the pages on a website, and that's blurbed in by crawlers, and that includes Google, but also the TESS thing, for example. And those crawlers would then also be looking for those semantic annotations if they find that in the HTML pages. And then a bit more ambitious and long-term and possibly more effort would be to get EDAM annotations into the BioC views and have mappings or even replace some of the BioC views. That certainly wouldn't be a short-term thing. So thank you.
Very much. So how are the BioC views defined at the moment? Is it a closed vocabulary that people can pick from? I can't remember.
People can have invalid BioC views terms, but the ones that show up on our BioC views page in organized packages are from a closed list.
Find in the BioC views package.
Yes.
And for that review we did, I also went into the BioC package and was doing some statistics on stuff. And we have also in the past tried to use the BioC package, BioC view package to build monster Docker containers. So I think they are really useful beyond just organizing stuff on the website. One thing I'm trying to find BioC views for XCMS right now, and that also includes immuno-oncology, which was added quite some time ago. And I have the inkling that there was a grant writing being involved that involved tagging immuno-oncology on more packages, where I think if we have that, then I also want to have a BioC on plant metabolomics on XCMS. But having a non-flat, EDAM-like, ontology-driven tagging and information on the packages would allow much richer annotations of functionality you find in packages.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a couple of things. One is the immuno-oncology one is kind of fun. It was actually used to drive it is for another grant. But what it actually does is it tags packages that are subset so if you go to iotnmoonshot.org and look at under resources, you'll see that there's something that looks like a BioC views, that navigation thing, but it's just the packages that are tagged immuno-oncology. So it kind of pulls out a subset of these domain-specific tags, and then you kind of navigate it in a domain-specific way. It's actually kind of fun to do it that way. Kind of the same idea that you were saying about your own. You just like to pull out those packages in some way. I like also the idea of moving from the ad hoc BioC views ontology, which is it's actually a directed acyclic graph, so there is a hierarchy of relations there, but to some kind of formal descriptions where somebody else has thought out carefully these things. I basically like that idea.
And coming back to the annotation of the so we were talking about injecting things on the description landing pages, but I think you also mentioned the vignettes as teaching material. So I guess that would require updating whatever it is that generates the HTML page, right? Which mandates a certain style to be implemented. Is that correct?
So for the vignettes, it's even simpler. For the vignettes, you have the RMD header. And in the header, you can include a particular, style sheet or something. And if you go to the BridgeDB, I have linked that in my thingy. Let's screen share again. And I do have an echo somewhere. If you go to the BridgeDB tutorial, which looks like that, and if we now try to see I didn't do that before, but somewhere, holy crap. Okay, is there some content?
Inject a lot of stuff at the top.
Yes. No, I wouldn't find that easily, but if you look into he has it also in the blog post that he had, but basically in the vignettes folder, you also have bioschemas HTML, which contains the information you want to have there, and then you need to inject that at the top of your vignette, which says includes bioschemas.html. And then on the website generated HTML will include all of that. So this would be some documentation we would need to inform our vignette writers, but it wouldn't require anything on the BioC infrastructure side.
That's very neat, actually. I was imagining having to mandate a particular style. I guess this only works for HTML vignettes, but that's much neater than forcing something on users.
Yeah. Well, it will put that on the users. The users will have to put that into their vignette, but then it's only the information part and not all the HTML generation magic. That's easy.
I mean, it seems like that could be included in BioC style, right? And then, and a lot of the fields seem like they could have been auto-filled from the, like from the package and so on.
No, then you would have more templating stuff, but most of the terms like genre, audience, tutorial type person, and all of that is included manually.
I see.
If we wanted to, we could make it part of BioC style, and even if you scrape that from the YAML header, it should be possible, right? But in this way, people could, if you just inject the HTML like this, then you don't mandate people use BioC style. Do we mandate people use BioC style?
We strongly suggest it.
Yeah, heavily encouraged. And one other thing about the URLs to the archive things, do we move the current version to the archive, or does it only move there once a new version has been generated?
Yes, they're archived. They're
Sorry?
just not the current. The current one isn't in the archive.
Because it feels like if we could just put the current one in there as well, then the URL would be consistent for everything. And whilst it might not be quite where you want to send people, at least it would be simple for whoever's writing the code at the other end.
I think again we are following CRAN, and there's not that we have to do that, but there's some value to being consistent that way. It can be consistent with different.
And if CRAN has that archive, I think the BioTools people and Bioconductor people can also work on that.
In which case, if there's no more questions, thank you very much for everybody that's presented today. It's been really, really interesting. Slightly different topics today, but it's been really cool. Does anybody have anything else they want to say?
Please jump into the issue mentioned in my notes, and then we get the discussion going again.
Is there a Slack channel for the developer forum or anything, like some place where we can post links and stuff and keep track?
Community Slack. There's a developer forum.
I see.
Yeah, it's not most widely used, so feel free to post things there.
And I'll clean up a couple links and be posting the slides there later today.
That sounds great. So thank you very much, everybody. And this is now recurring. It's the third Thursday of every month. So see you just before Christmas. I guess it's the 19th or something of December.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
And hopefully see some of you in Brussels in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, something like that.
Mm-hmm.